Hi everybody, my name is Crystal Martineau, and this is going to be just a really quick video kind of demonstrating how I do some of the blood typing, how I figure out what blood types are eligible of donating to what other blood types, who can receive from what blood types, etc., etc. And I think this is a nice, easy way to do it. It doesn't require the rote memorization of, oh, okay, type O can donate to these blood types, type A can receive from these blood types, all of the back and forth there. So this method will require 4 definitions, a little bit of drawing, and then a tiny bit of physiology. And that's all you'll need to be able to figure out blood compatibility for the rest of your life. So there are going to be some antigens and other things that we'll talk about here in a second that go beyond the scope of this class. So this isn't all that's there to it, all that's kind of incorporated within blood transfusions and things. But this is a really excellent jumping off point, and it's going to get to kind of the heart of the issue, or kind of the main concepts that we'll need to know when donating, receiving blood types and or testing mother and fetal compatibility with their blood types. So the definitions we'll want to get to today here are a transfusion reaction or agglutination reaction. That is what we want to avoid, right? So that is going to be the clumping together of our blood cells, and that's going to occur when we have that incompatibility with a mother and a fetal blood type, or if we do a incorrect transfusion and we put the wrong blood type into an individual. So if we are giving them red blood cells, if we are doing a transfusion, they need blood for some reason. That could be a complication during surgery. It could be due to blood loss following an accident, blood poisoning. We would need to kind of get some good healthy blood cells in there. But no matter what, we're in need of healthy blood cells to transport our oxygen, since we've already learned that that is the main goal of our erythrocytes, aka our red blood cells. And so if we put the blood cells into this person's body and they all agglutinate or clump together, they're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to get to the surface of the lungs, load off the carbon dioxide, load on the oxygen, and get all around the body into the veins, arteries, capillaries, all of those things that they need to go into. So worst case scenario, you can cause death or serious illness, injury, death of tissues, etc. with a transfusion reaction. Best case scenario, you didn't really help the problem. So if we're causing that transfusion reaction, at the very least, we're going to have big clumps of blood cells that are not going to aid in the oxygen transport for that individual that was in need of assistance. So next definition here is going to be an antigen. There's a couple different ways that we use antigens in biology, or a couple different ways we understand and conceptualize them. For the purposes of this blood typing demo, we're going to consider antigens something made by our cells, and that is going to allow us to recognize a cell as either part of our body or a cell that's compatible with our body, or a lack of an antigen could be considered an incompatibility. And so obviously we're now starting to hint towards that blood typing that we'll get to. So again, pathogens and other things can have antigens on them, and part of the immune system's job is to kind of decipher those antigens and say, is this a pathogen? Is it my own cell? But for blood typing, we can leave it alone. We're going to talk about antigens specifically on the surface of erythrocytes, and again, they're made by ourselves, made by our own cells, and they're the way that we recognize our own cells or like cells, cells that are like our own cells and compatible. Antibodies are similar but different. They are also made by your own cells. However, they are made in response to foreign material, quote unquote. So sometimes a good thing, pathogens getting other things out of the body, sometimes a bad thing. So if we donated blood that has already been screened for disease, illness, malformations, deformities, things like that, and we've considered it quote unquote healthy blood, then we really don't want to mount an immune response and these antibodies against it. But that can still happen if we are using the wrong blood types, which is what we're getting to here in a minute. And so antigens, kind of good, register a cell as our own. It's kind of the passport that we give to the TSA agent. Antibodies, bad. That's the security that's going to drag you out of the airport when you don't have the proper ID or you're acting chaotic. And then blood grouping is going to be really relevant to that as well. And you're probably already familiar to some extent with the blood groups and blood types, but we use an ABO grouping system for the blood types in humans. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple things out so we can kind of get these definitions rolling here. But we already know that we have our 4 major blood types, and that's going to be type A, type B, type A and B, and type O. And for the duration of this video, let's go ahead and just kind of classify our type O blood. Think of it as a 0, and I'll get to why in just a second here. And so I didn't leave enough room at the top here, but let's say we're working with antigens. So antigens are made by our own cells, and they're how we recognize ourselves. So our A-type blood here, I'm going to draw a nice little red blood cell, a perfect little biconcave disc. I'll draw one for B. I'll draw one for AB, they're getting worse, and I'll draw one for O, and that's our red blood cells, erythrocytes right here. And so A type blood, we're going to make the A antigen. So let's draw this, and let's say this is an A antigen, and there's many A antigens sticking off of this red blood cell. And it says, hey, I'm type A. I have these antigens with me. So if you check for our own type of blood, let's check for these type A antigens. We're going to go to type B, and let's do a little square here. And these are our type B antigens. I'll just draw two for the sake of our room here. And then, as it stands to reason, hopefully, AB is going to make both types of antigens. So they're going to make our A antigens, and they're also going to make B antigens. And so they have both of these present. And they recognize their own blood cells because of these antigens here. O, like I said, we're going to think of it as a 0, and that's because they do not make any antigens so far from what we've learned. There's no antigens present there. So keep in mind there are two possible antigens that we've gone over so far, and that's A and B. And type O blood is in fact just lacking either of those. It's not making its own separate antigen there. So these are the antigens that are present. The problem then becomes when we take these cells and we put them in the wrong type of system. So let's say we have an A, that's annoying, excuse me one second. There we go. Let's say we have A type blood. So we have a red blood cell that makes these little A antigens here, and they're swimming all around in the blood supply there. I'm going to draw one more. And then let's say we donated B type blood. So now we have a blood cell in this population that has our B antigens in it. So we can assume from my tone of voice at least that we have a problem. And that is because we have what's called antibodies. So now we'll get into our immune system a little bit. And our immune system is going to produce antibodies. They're typically drawn in this little Y shape because they have two binding sites. So we'll have a antigen, this B antigen right here, bound to one of the binding sites. And then let's pretend there's another little B blood type off screen right here. But these two B type blood cells, B blood cells, are going to bind to the sites of these antibodies right here. And antibodies can kind of clump together and cause lots of other binding as well. So now you can see how we're getting into this transfusion or this agglutination reaction. So all of these are lumping together because of these antibodies that we produced. And we produced these antibodies because we found an antigen that we know we do not have. So now let's get a little bit more into the blood typing. So give me one moment here. Let's keep those annotations, but let's insert a new slide. I'll pop that up. All right. So we know that when we do a blood transfusion, we're going to have a donor and we're going to have a recipient. Donor is the person going to Red Cross, giving the blood, getting the little IV bag hooked up. And then the recipient is the person that's gone through the accident, the surgery, whatever, and needs that blood given to them. So we can figure out these donor-recipient compatibilities very, very easy. Much less complicated than if we're trying to just memorize all of the blood types. And all we have to do is we have to draw those blood cells that we just got familiar with on the donor side and then the recipient side. So let's just say for this reaction, we're going to go type A, what's happening, to AB. So we're taking blood from a person that's type A, and we're putting them in an individual that's type AB. So our donor would look like this with our little A antigens. And then our recipient would look like this with A and B antigens. Just fix that. So they have both kinds here. So all you have to do when you do blood typing in this method is make sure that when we go from our donor to our recipient, we're not adding anything new. Because as we learned on that last slide, if we add a new antigen, our body mounts that immune response and makes those antibodies, against it. So as long as we don't add something new when going from left to right, we are going to be fine. We're not giving the body anything to react to. So if we take this A type blood cell, this is type A and this is type AB, and we put it in this AB individual, we have not added any new antigens. So there's nothing for the immune system to get mad about. However, let's pretend that our donor is now AB. Gotta add the A's. And then our recipient, let's say they're type B. So type B, we have our squares. They only have these guys. So now if we take this donor on the left side and we add it to the recipient on the right side, these A antigens are brand new to this person. They don't have any, their immune system's not familiar with them, and their immune system's going to mount a response against them as if it was a foreign material or a pathogenic cell or something trying to harm the body. So we're going to mount an immune response, and we're going to get this agglutination reaction, and therefore that transfusion was not from compatible blood type, not between compatible blood types. So you can do this with anything. You can do this with all of the blood types here. So let me actually kind of get out of here a little bit. Excuse me. And what we're going to do here is, let's keep those, add one more slide. I need more than I thought. And we can basically, again, just kind of write all of these out. So you can say from donor to recipient, if we're donating A or AB or B or O, the antigens present are A and B, and none. So when you do your recipient line here, the possible recipients are the same, A, B, B, and O, and I'm just going to go ahead and write them out because I think it's helpful to have a reference in both places. So if we do that, we get to see, okay, so how can we add to the right-hand side without adding anything new? So this A, if it goes to this A blood, A to A, that's compatible, right? That makes sense. We have the exact same blood type. And so we know that this is going to be a compatible match here. If this A goes to AB, we still haven't added anything new. So that's still going to be A-okay. And then if this A goes to either of these two, neither of them have the A antigen present, so they will not be compatible with these types. They will cause that transfusion reaction, and so they're not going to be compatible. A is not going to be a compatible donor for either of these two blood types here. So now we go to AB, and so you should notice, using our method here, that AB blood, excuse me, can only donate to one individual, and that is fellow AB blood typers right here, because if we add here, the new antigen is B. If we add AB to this, the new antigen is A, and if we add AB blood to an O-type individual, both antigens are new. So all three of those options give new antigens into the body, and they give our immune system, and specifically those antibodies, something to attack, something to attach to, something to clump together. So those are not going to be compatible blood types. And so I'll save you all of the rest of this, but you can do this method, and basically, again, you're making sure that when you do this, you're not adding anything new to the recipient side, and hopefully those drawings help us kind of conceptualize how that reaction is going to happen and what specifically is going to go wrong if we add new antigens to the body. So there's one more layer of complexity that we want to add, and that is going to be the positive or negative distinction. So you probably heard someone saying I'm A positive or I'm O negative. And so what we see there is basically that all of these blood types here could have two different options. One of those is that we're going to use A as an example, but if they're A negative, then we just see A antigens. This is an antigen on a blood cell. And then if they are, let's say, O positive, O blood cells. I'm going to draw the little biconcave disc so we don't think this is a letter O. But O blood cells, are not going to have either of the A or B antigens. But now that it's positive, we've got that positive distinction. We know that it has an RH antigen. It's either called RH, it can be called D antigen, same thing. Those are denoting the same type of antigen. So now, otherwise, without this RH, if we're O negative, you can see that we are going to be a universal donor. There's no blood type here on the right-hand side that we could give a brand new antigen to, right? All of these blood types either have none, B or A, and the O is no antigens that it's going to make antibodies mad with. Now, though, if we add this positive, we have none of the A or B, but we do have RH antigen now. So if this is O negative and we try to go from O positive to O negative, we have added an RH antigen. Let me give that a fun shape. Let's do triangles. We have added a triangle over in this blood that otherwise has no antigens. That's going to be a problem. That's going to cause a transfusion reaction as well. So these RH do have to be taken into account. They work a little bit differently than A and B. We're going to develop these, the potential for these antibodies later in life. So A and B, you'll develop your antibodies by early childhood, infancy, but early childhood, I would say even before toddler years typically. But with our RH, you typically only mount this immune response and develop these antibodies if you're exposed as an Rh negative individual to Rh positive blood. Either, again, if you have a baby inside that is Rh positive and you're negative, or if you get a transfusion. The effect is the same because if you are exposed, you'll make the antibodies and you'll mount the response and you'll have a transfusion reaction. But the development of the antibodies works a little bit different. And that's why we kind of have this overarching positive and negative distinction that we give to all of these blood types. So with this, I'm running out of time on this video here, but you can see that our O negative makes no antigens and is therefore our universal donor, can donate to anybody, and you'll earn bonus points with the Red Cross. And AB positive has all three and is therefore the universal recipient.